Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we are going to review Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. But before that, we have a special guest, Matt Ward, and he is going to talk to us about Portrait of a Lady on Fire, as well as a surprise topic about Independent Spirit Awards. Join us!
And welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me, as always, is a man who never gives his essence away. Mike, how are you doing today?
Well, you have to protect your bodily fluids.
Absolutely, you do. It's very important. Something the Russians need to learn. Also with us is a special guest who is battling his possessed left hand. How are you doing today, Matt Ward?
Doing great. It's great to be the Slim Pickens filling in for Justin's Peter Sellers.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a good one. If this is your first time listening to our show, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which is, you guessed it, a Criterion Collection focused episode that we do every other week, where we review a film from the Criterion Collection that is voted on by the listeners. Now, before we get into our main review, we will be doing our usual news on the march, where our special guest, Matt, will be able to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, because we are gentlemen and he is the guest. But don't worry, all of this will be time-stamped. So if you do not want to listen to news on the march and you want to skip straight to the review of Dr. Strangelove, go right ahead.
Yeah, so real quick, welcome to the podcast again, Matt. How are you doing today? I mean, we kind of talked, but I was wondering if there's anything you wanted to plug or talk about, anything that you've done recently.
Sure. I mean, if we're gonna do that prior to news on the march, I mean, I'm taking a break from social media, so I'm not going to plug any social media. You can find all of my film reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, but also on my personal website, cinematicconsiderations.com. But part of the reason I'm taking a break from social media is because of my Rotten Tomatoes career. So I recently reviewed the Taylor Swift documentary Miss Americana from the Sundance Film Festival and posted a negative review of that film that temporarily dropped the score from a 91 to an 89 on the official certified fresh score, and had my social media bombarded by a lot of hateful trolls. And so for my mental health, I decided to take a break from social media for the year.
Smart.
Yeah, I think you made the right decision. Just a sidebar here. I haven't personally partaken in that much social media, probably in the past 3 years. I get on Twitter sometimes for the show, and that's about the extent of it, really. And I gotta say, I think you'll enjoy it. I think by the end of it, you won't even miss social media, and you'll be like, what am I doing going back there with all those people with their opinions and their toxicity?
Well, I don't have to worry about that so much, with blocking and all that sort of stuff. My bigger loss is missing out on all of the film news that I normally find on Twitter. It's going to take me a little bit longer to dig around. Twitter is always a great aggregator of movie news.
For sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you guys want to come talk to us on social media, but after we've given it such a great plug on there, you can do that on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Casual Cinecast, or you could just email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. Also, if you would like to review our show on iTunes, that would be super great. We're not going to ask Matt Ward to, because we don't want him to drop it down to an 89%.
Yeah.
But anybody else can.
We've seen what happens when Matt reviews things.
Yeah. The legions of Cinecast fans will bug you probably if you drop it down. So we don't want that.
We call them the casties as opposed to the Swifties.
Yes. Or but the casualties. Really. We don't call them anything.
All right, and with that, gentlemen, I can't think of anything else to just go over right now, so I say we go ahead and move into news on the march so we can find out what Matt's been up to.
Ah, yes, exciting.
You on the mark!
All right, man, I'm just going to throw it to you.
Sure. So I know Chris can also talk about the same subject because within the last week, both he and I saw Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I've actually already seen this film. It was a contender for the Film Independent Spirit Awards, which I'm a voting member on, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But I wanted to chat a little bit more about Portrait of a Lady on Fire because I got to actually see it on a big screen for the first time. Went out of my way, drove 90 plus minutes from my hometown of Fredericksburg all the way over to Austin to see this on the big screen at Alamo Drafthouse.
Nice.
I was just blown away by the film's beauty and just presence on a large screen. It's a fantastic film. It was my number 2 film of 2019, and that was just off of a home viewing. And so it's really elevated my experience and love for that film, getting to see it on the big screen. It's not even out on DVD yet, and it's already been announced as a Criterion upcoming release. So it's an incredible film from a outstanding young filmmaker who's gone from a coming-of-age trilogy to making her first feature film about adulthood. And it's a wonderful romance story that takes so many great things about the relationship between an artist and her model subject, and how that relationship evolves over time and has them essentially fall in love.
Yeah, this was actually my number 9 film of 2019 as well. So I'm right there with you. This movie is beautiful. It is filmed so well and just so with care. Everything just seems so made with love, I guess is the easiest way to put it. The passion behind this movie, the performances behind this movie, all of which just floored me. And the thing is, I didn't think it could because, if you've seen the trailer for this movie or if you know the synopsis of this movie, you know what this movie is. There's no surprises. You know exactly what you're getting when you go into it. But in my opinion, it's just so much more rich and detailed and beautiful than I was expecting it to be.
I think that's because of the intimacy that you get watching this romance evolve. Sciamma takes so much time creating these very quiet, long take moments where we as viewers feel like we're intruding on a love affair with our own personal gaze before we're actually realizing that we're seeing Marianne and Eloise, the way that they look at each other and how that evolves through the camera lens.
I have to say I was blown away by this movie as well. I wish I'd have seen it so it could have been on my top 10 list last year. The performances are great. I think that's one of the things that elevates this movie to being as spectacular as it is. The other thing that I really liked is how quiet this movie is. And I don't know what your experience was at home, but in the theater where I saw it, it was so quiet, and the sound system was so great. Like, you could hear the fire crackling, you could hear the waves washing over you, and there's hardly any music or no music in there whatsoever, no score. But there's a couple of moments of diegetic music, and those moments are so great. Especially the one in the middle of the movie is just, I don't know, like on another level. And the whole movie, I feel like this is going to be a classic. Like in 20 years, we'll be talking about this movie still. But I really love this movie. I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to find something that I dislike about it.
Well, and the great thing about what you're talking about when it comes to the lack of a score in that film is that when you do get that music, it's considered and there's a point to it. Without going into too many spoilers, there's 2 very specific uses of music. One in the middle of the film and one at the very end that kind of wrap everything up together. And it's that enjoyment of music. And the placement of that is so well considered. You can tell that Chama has really struck a fine balance to creating these moments and building a story around specific moments. Even from the first time that we see Heloise, the way that she is introduced into the film is just so poetic and artistic. We see her first from behind as a long camera shot tracks her walking out towards the ocean, and the way that her character is revealed to Marianne is just incredible.
Completely agree. And the other thing, I think there's two movies that really like struck me emotionally from last year, and that was Mr. Rogers and then this movie where you like walk out of the movie.
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood?
Yeah, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers movie. But and this movie, like where you walk out and you're just kind of like emotionally drained, you know, like you need to go sit in your car and cry for a little bit before you like do anything else. Yeah, both of those movies were really great, and a lot of that has to do with like your own emotional well-being or whatever. But like, yeah, I really enjoyed both of those movies, and this one's really great.
So you mentioned, Matt, that this was your number 2 movie of the year.
That's correct.
I'm curious now, what was your number 1?
I'm staying with the international features category, and Parasite was my number 1 film of the year.
Nice. You're on the same wavelength as Chris and I.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible film, and the production design to the screenplay, everything about that film is the moments that are created by Bong Joon-ho. There's so many similarities between these two films, and he's so right when he said during the Golden Globes that once you get over that 1-inch tall world of subtitles, that you're introduced to so many more exquisite films.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely true. I remember back when I first got a job at Blockbuster when I was going to college back in 2006, 2007, my constant struggle was trying to recommend good foreign films to customers. And as soon as I recommended a movie that they had to read subtitles, which of course I would always warn them, but as soon as that would come up, I'd have them sold on the movie, but then I would mention at the end, like, by the way, you have to read it.
Yeah.
You could just see like their faces just completely dismiss everything that we just talked about.
But that's the great thing about Parasite winning Best Picture. After that's happened, I've had so many people come up to me and just be like, so this Parasite thing, like, they're actually interested in a foreign film because of what happened with Parasite breaking through and winning. Like, they're interested in overcoming that barrier, and hopefully a win for Parasite will do a lot more to make these sorts of films like Portrait of Lady on Fire, Parasite, Burning, all these sorts of terrific foreign language films. The Farewell is also, even though it's technically an American film, that has that same sort of barrier to it because of the subtitles, and hopefully a win for Parasite and the proliferation of these fantastic foreign films in American markets will really change and make a bigger international world of films accessible to a wider audience.
You're saying all the right things, but I dare not hope.
Well, and I will say, let me counter my own point. So the great thing about Portrait of a Lady on Fire is that it has been so celebrated and everywhere except for France. So this past weekend was the César Awards, which is essentially the French Academy Awards. And Portrait of a Lady on Fire was nominated for 6 or 8 awards and only won for cinematography. And Roman Polanski was celebrated for a film called An Officer and a Spy that is probably going to be France's nomination in this category for the American Academy Awards next year. And then a Amazon release, Les Miserables, not the musical, but a crime drama from a first-time director that was nominated this year in International Feature as the official French selection, won the Best Picture Cezanne Award. But it's all of those films, An Officer and a Spy, Les Miserables, several other the films nominated in large categories at the César Awards were so masculine and so old school, male-driven films. I've seen Les Miserables. It's another film nominated in the Independent Spirits, and it's essentially Training Day meets End of Watch. And so you're getting a lot of these just like really heavy male-centric films, even in an international community. So there's still a ways to go to kind of even out the playing field a little bit. But between Parasite and Moonlight and all these sorts of films kind of broadening people's horizons with historic Best Picture wins, we're working our way there.
You know, I hope you are right, but my fear is just that we are driving more and more people away from movies. Every time something artistic or foreign wins, I get the feeling that like average Joe movie watcher isn't following us down this road of curiosity. But I hope I'm wrong.
But I don't think people are treating Parasite like it's the artist.
You know, maybe not, but I feel like the only people who would see them differently would probably be people who are already open to movies.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I could tell my dad to watch Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like, I think he would be just as bored by the idea of the artist as he would Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
But you could get your dad to watch Parasite, and I guarantee you that you could get your dad to watch Les Miserables, which will be out on Amazon pretty shortly. And there's going to be a lot more, international films for everybody versus just certain select groups. We got to keep more of these films going. Roma pushed the way forward for Parasite to win, and hopefully that will have broken through the barrier completely within the next couple of years, especially as places like the Casual Cinecast continue to champion these sorts of films in their Criterion collections and whatnot as well.
Sure, and I think that Roma. You mentioned Roma. I think if anyone can help do this, what you're describing is like get the average Joe American into watching subtitles, and then vice versa for other countries as well. If we could get people to watch movies that they have to read subtitles for, I think Netflix is the best champion of that, because Netflix is something that you can literally just click on it, and if you get into it, you'll watch it. You don't have to rent it. Like I remember when I worked at Blockbuster, if someone accidentally rented a movie with subtitles, they would come back and demand a different movie.
Right.
Like without paying a cent extra. You know what I mean? Like, so I think with Netflix, if it's ever going to happen, that challenge, I think streaming's the way to do it. So I hope you're right. I would love more movies. I would love every year whenever the Oscars come around to just have the whole idea of an international film category irrelevant. That would be cool to me. But I digress. Okay, so anything else about Portrait of a Lady on Fire that you want to talk about?
No, but I can use that as a way to move into the other thing that I wanted to talk about.
Do it.
So
this is your springboard.
This is my springboard. Yes. So recently, earlier tonight, I was listening to your podcast about the Oscars,
thank you.
Of course. And Mike, I know you had some concerns, and several of you did, about a lot of the people that were nominated and some of the people that won in different categories versus people who aren't even nominated at all. I know you felt that way about Renee Zellweger's performance in Judy, and Laura Dern having no competition in supporting female, or as best supporting actress. And so I wanted to offer you an alternative to that. So as I mentioned earlier, I saw Portrait of a Lady on Fire at home early because I got a screener link for that film, and I didn't get it because I am a film critic, even though I am a film critic. I got it because I'm a voter for the Film Independent Spirit Awards, which literally anyone who's listening to this podcast can join Film Independent and vote on these awards annually. So I got a screener copy of Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Our awards, the Indie Spirits, are broadcast on IFC the night before the Academy Awards. They're essentially the small budget version of the Oscars, and you don't have to be in Hollywood or a big shot to be involved in that sort of thing. The only real requirement is that you pay a membership fee, and then you get either screener links or DVD copies of 30 plus independent movies, great movies that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise get to be involved in seeing, especially for someone like me that I have to drive 90 minutes and wait 3 months to go see a movie. So I just wanted to let you know, like, the Film Independent Spirit Awards, our Best Picture winner was The Farewell. We had
Nice.
Everything nominated from The Lighthouse to Honey Boy to Uncut Gems. Adam Sandler won Best Actor this year. Elizabeth
Just
Moss
listening to
was
you talk, it just sounds like an embarrassment of riches compared to the Oscars.
for sure. Yeah. So, and I mean, like, Elizabeth Moss was nominated for her Smell. Our supporting female winner.
Yeah, that wording is funny. Elizabeth Moss was nominated for her Smell.
I know that is the name of the film. She was
I know.
nominated.
It's a great movie.
It is. And one of the great things about it, and we'll talk about, you didn't think Laura Dern had any competition. Well, she wasn't even eligible for Best Supporting Female, is the way that the Film Indies call that award, because Marriage Story was given the Robert Altman Award, which is basically the Best Ensemble Award. And the winner of that award, they pull all of the people that could have been nominated in those categories out. So Adam Driver was not nominated for Best Male Lead. Scarlett Johansson was not nominated for Best Female Lead. They just pulled all of those potential nominees to open the field up to a wider audience, or, wider films. So we had Xiao Zhuzhen from The Farewell win Best Supporting Actress, and Taylor Russell was nominated from Waves, and Jennifer Lopez was nominated from Hustlers. Jonathan Majors was nominated for The Last Black Man in San Francisco. We had Apollo 11 in Best Documentary. So we have a lot more to offer than the Academy Awards for some cinephiles who might want to get involved in those sort of awards.
Well, that is awesome. I really appreciate you letting us know about that. I am definitely going to be looking into this. I cannot even express how interested I am in this. The idea of getting screeners has always been something that I have wanted, because I don't live near one of the large cities in Texas. I'm like you. I have to drive like 90 minutes to 2 hours just to, like if I want to see The Irishman in theaters, I had to travel 2 hours to do it, or Roma, or a lot of these movies that are more of like the indie stuff. So this definitely sounds interesting, and I have no doubt that our listeners would find that interesting as well.
Absolutely. Basically, if you look at it this way, so at least for 2020, they adjust the numbers a little bit on a yearly basis, but there's a project threshold in terms of the budget of a film to be eligible. So this year, I believe it was $20 million. So a film was made for $20 million or less, it was eligible to be nominated. So you don't have big, large films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or The Irishman or anything like that, but we still got a lot of the great Netflix movies, with Marriage Story being nominated. Basically every A24 film was represented in some way. Neon is represented. You're getting like the really high quality movies, Sony Pictures Classics, all of those great movie houses and movies that you wouldn't get to see in a small movie theater. They come to you because they want you to watch their movies and vote on their awards, or vote for them for awards. I got to see a movie through the Film Independent Spirits that was debuting in America at Sundance this year, and I got to watch it before Sundance. So there's a little bit of everything in the Film Independent Spirit Awards, and we'd love to have everybody out joining in and enjoying these films.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. I guess the obvious question next would be, how would average Joe listener to this podcast go about signing up?
So all you have to do is just go online to filmindependent.org, and then there's a sign-up link in there. I believe the annual membership fee is like $95, or you can get a 2-year membership. That's what I'm on right now, and it's a little bit of a discount. But for someone like you or I, Mike, that's worth it in terms of like not having to drive as far. Like I knew
I'd
that
save
I
that
didn't
much money in movie tickets and gas.
I knew I didn't have to run out of my way to go and see The Lighthouse in theaters because it was coming to me eventually, and that I could watch it at my house.
About when did the screeners start getting mailed out? Do you have to like wait months, or sometimes you mentioned you get to see them early.
Yeah, I got to see them early, so like usually it's late December, early January. Our awards season is based on the Academy Awards season, so since our actual ceremony is the night before the Oscars, it adjusts every year based on when the actual Academy Awards ceremony is. So this
Right.
year is all condensed and moved up because the Academy Awards was moved up by 3 weeks, and now they're going to be going back another 3 weeks for next year. So I'm not exactly sure when they will release it. Usually, we usually get about a month to watch all of the different films before actually having to turn in our votes before the actual awards ceremony. And you're looking at like a good 25 to 30 films, some that you've heard of, some that you haven't ever heard of. And it's a great way to continue getting that education into a world of cinema that you wouldn't necessarily know about.
Yeah. Well, you've sold me. So, all
right,
I'm definitely down.
I'm 1 for 2.
I just signed up, so
Oh, okay.
while you were talking.
Yeah.
I'm 2 for 2.
Maybe whenever Justin edits this, he'll break down and sign up too before he finishes editing.
I've been trying to get Justin to do this for 2 years, so we'll see what happens.
He's mentioned it to me before, not in as much detail as what you just described, but I would bet he will probably be doing that. Especially if I do it and I can watch all these movies on screeners and Chris does it.
And then you can have your own episode about the Independent Spirit Awards and how you voted, and it actually influences an actual awards ceremony. It's a really cool and interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I imagine it makes it a lot more interesting and fun to watch too.
Definitely. When you know that your opinion actually matters, it's an incredible experience.
Yeah. Must be nice.
Mike, your opinion matters.
Thank you. That's what I wanted. I was just fishing for that. Do we have anything else we want to talk about in news on the march?
I think that about covers it.
Yeah. Anything else, Matt, before we move
No,
on?
I'm good. I thank you for allowing me to kind of take over news on the march.
Yeah. We thank you for doing it. So, with that, guys, I guess it is time to move into our Casually Criterion review for Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Well, it's good that you're fine and I'm fine. I agree with you. It's great to be fine. Now then, Dmitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb. The bomb, Dmitri. The hydrogen bomb. Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dmitri.
All right, everyone. So, just like always with our Casually Criterion episodes, we will not be doing a spoiler-free section and then a spoiler section. The movies have been out for a while, in this case, since 1964. So, no spoilers apply. So, we are just going to go ahead and get straight on into it. So, that was your warning. Turn back now. All right, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Peter Sellers ×3, George C. Scott, James Earl Jones, and Slim Pickens. The IMDb synopsis says, an insane general triggers a path to nuclear holocaust that a war room full of politicians and generals frantically tries to stop. Justin's not here, but I know if he were, he would likely comment that synopsis for being efficient and short.
Yeah. That was actually, when I first read that, I was like, Justin would like this synopsis. So.
Yeah, yeah. So, you're here in spirit, Justin.
It's barely longer than the title of the movie.
I know. Yeah, that's a good point. It might not.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, Matt, so you are the guest. You are our guest.
Yes.
So why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your overall thoughts of Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb?
Well, I don't know about you two gentlemen, but I know that I first watched this movie about 10 or 15 years ago, because as you're trying to become more knowledgeable and expand your education base as a young cinephile, this is like right at the top of the list at one of the movies you need to see, and it's AFI, one of the funniest movies of all time, and you watch it usually by yourself. during the day, and it doesn't strike you as particularly funny. Like, you're just trying to understand so much of it, and the dryness if you're watching it by yourself, it's very hard to really enjoy it as a comedy. And you're like, man, this is really gripping. It's like a really, really harrowing drama. And then you realize after you watch it 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, that there's jokes beyond "gentlemen, there's no fighting in the war room,"
Right.
and so, like, it becomes, the absurdity of the situation becomes more comedic for you as an individual. I wish that I could have seen this film in a theater with a bunch of people who'd never seen it before, like I was watching for the first time, because I can see how it resonates differently for an audience that can get that, oh, it's okay to laugh in these moments. So much of, at least my experience with this film has been, I'm not sure if this is funny, or do I need to think about this a little bit more? And it becomes funnier later on you go, and the Dr. Strangelove character himself is so absurd that you just kind of have to laugh at that. But so much of this movie, it's only 90 minutes long, but you can go 20-25 minutes watching this movie and not laughing and still love this movie. It's a great movie. I love this movie, but I don't think of it as a bust your gut comedy.
I recently had that experience with Barry Lyndon, and I always found Barry Lyndon as funny, but I saw it in the theater with a group full of people, and especially the first half of that movie, people were laughing out loud at. And so, like, that's that same kind of experience where, like, I never laughed out loud at Barry Lyndon, but in that group setting, it was much funnier than when I had seen it by myself.
Well, and I don't know how you felt. Did you see Patton before you saw this movie for the first time?
I didn't. I saw Patton later.
Yeah.
See, I saw Patton first, and you get this impression of George C. Scott, celebrated man's man actor, and then he is doing gaudy, bombastic things in this movie that
Blast off.
jarring the first time that you see them, but it's just so. I find that character now to be my favorite because some of it's so outlandish and so fun. You can see how much enjoyment there is eating off of that character and that performance.
His fall in the war room is probably my favorite fall in all of movies.
Yeah.
Right up there with Philip Seymour Hoffman in Along Came Polly.
Oh, gosh.
Which is the only thing I recommend about that movie. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and go with my thoughts on Dr. Strangelove now. If you're done, Matt.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so I first saw Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, when I was, I want to say 20 years old, maybe 19. And Matt's description of your first time watching it was pretty much exactly my description. At the time, it was probably in the late 2000s. And I must say, I didn't really take much from the movie. I enjoyed it, but I didn't get it. And I don't think I came anywhere close to being able to appreciate what Kubrick was doing. And I've seen it probably 3 times since my first time. And each time I've started to pick up on more and more. And I think this is Kubrick's only straight-up comedy. But even then, like you said, it's not filmed like a comedy. It's not even, like, everything about it tells you this is not a comedy, right? Like, the cinematography is not funny. It's dramatic. The performances, except for being a little over the top, are mostly dramatic. It's the situations and the dialogue that you have to take a step back from and really parse it to realize, like, the absurdity of it all. I guess one thing I didn't quite pick up on until probably a little bit the last time I watched it, and definitely this time, was how I'm pretty certain this movie is about, I don't even know how to describe it, like, fragile masculinity. It's very much about sexual hang-ups of people in power. And yeah, so I can break more of that down as we talk about it later, but that's kind of where I come down this movie, which is just that I think when you look at the innuendo and really read in between the lines of what this movie's saying, it's pretty biting. it's pretty intelligent, and certainly very relevant to today. And you know what? I think the past couple years living, in America and just the world in general, I think having watched Dr. Strangelove after the past couple years, I appreciate it in a way that I don't think I could have when I first watched it as a teenager, before I observed the world a little bit more, Yeah. So, I'll leave it there. But Chris, what do you say about the movie?
I think not surprising, but I think we all kind of had the first viewing experience where, like, when I first saw this, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. And I don't think I quite understood it. I saw it about the same age as that you guys did, and I wasn't quite sure. And I remember talking to like a family member or somebody about it, and them telling me about how funny it was. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I had to think, it was like, was this the same movie? Because it is played, like you said, for some of the performances are over the top, but it is played in a very serious way, like in a kind of B-movie way, like with the performances being a little over the top. But as I watched it more and more, this movie's hilarious. And Peter Sellers, and even, in fact, I don't even know that in the first viewing of this film, I realized that Peter Sellers was the president. So, yes, that tells you how much I knew about it when I first watched it. But Peter Sellers is amazing in this film, in like most films he is in. And George C. Scott has got to be my favorite character, though, because I think George C. Scott and his reactions and his fall and all that stuff is so great. And it really takes this movie into a place that's over the top and fun. But yeah, I really enjoy this movie. It's interesting to watch Stanley Kubrick do a film that's not like Barry Lyndon, like so refined and well shot. And I think that this film is really well shot, but it's like purposely doesn't look super great. Like, I'm thinking specifically of like the planes and stuff like that. There are things that don't necessarily look great, whereas in his other films like 2001 and his other films, it's so pristine and looks so good. It's interesting that in this film he's kind of gone out of his way to make things look not real good. So yeah, I really enjoy this movie, and I look forward to diving further in depth with it.
Yeah, so whenever Kubrick set out to make this movie, like all of his movies, it's an adaptation of something, right? With this movie, it's a novel called Red Alert, which was actually not a comedy novel at all. But Kubrick, I guess, through the course of trying to bring it to screen, I guess realized somewhere along the way that this needed to be a black comedy.
Well, there's actually what was the name of the other film that came out at the same time that was the serious version of this film?
There's a couple. That's a Sidney Lumet one, I believe.
And I believe it came out around the same time.
Yeah, and then there was also like there was a few in that time as well. There was another one besides Sidney Lumet, and there's also one called like the China Syndrome or something like that. Mm-hmm. I want to say with like Faye Dunaway. But anyways, so yeah, this movie was very much turned into a black comedy, and like all of Stanley Kubrick's movies, this movie's pretty pessimistic towards humanity. This is a comedy with almost no traditional comedy tropes. So it's very much a head scratcher. I think when this movie came out, I think a lot of the innuendo and especially the, I don't even know what to say, like the sexual politics behind it, or the sexual frustrations of people in power. I think a lot of that was kind of lost on people because as I was doing research, I came across a letter from the Stanley Kubrick archives from Stanley Kubrick to a fan that had written him a letter, and the fan had essentially asked him about like, hey, everyone in the military, all the officers all have like sexual hangups, and it's all about kind of like their masculinity being challenged and things like that. And Kubrick kind of responded saying that, yes, that's exactly right. It's a shame that this kind of conversation has to be done through private correspondence because not a lot of people have even brought that up when talking about this movie. So then, you look at it a little bit more knowing that, and it's just kind of all over the place in this movie. Dr. Strangelove, he's very much impotent, just like Ripper, the main general who's signing this whole thing over to begin with. Jack D. Ripper, I think is his name, right? General Jack D. Ripper.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in it, he comes to his crazy peace on earth ramblings. That the drawings that Peter Sellers finds. He came to those because he had the inability to perform sexually, but through his own words, luckily he was able to interpret these confusing feelings in the right way.
Yeah. Not giving away his essence.
Yeah, not giving away his essence. And then, you have this kind of dialogue throughout the whole movie, these innuendos. The whole movie starts with two planes refilling in the air, and you see a phallic object going into another plane with, like, romantic music playing. So this whole movie is very much about the fragile male ego being in charge of things and kind of using their fragile ego to, I guess, make terrible decisions. And the world kind of gets punished for their own hangups. Did you guys get any of that at all, or am I reading too much into this?
I don't think you're reading too much into it at all. I mean, you look at the sexual politics of this film in terms of its casting. There's only one woman in the film entirely, and it's General Turgidson.
Buck Turgidson, yeah.
Yeah, so it's his secretary, and we see her in a bikini right from the outset. They've obviously had sex or are about to have sex when they get interrupted at 3 a.m, and he's like, he tells her he has to go into the war room, and because a gentleman's work is never done or something like that, and she responds with, well, I'm always ready to go too, and like, just stay here, and and we can have sex before you go. And then
he tells her to start the countdown, and
that's exactly right.
He'll be back for the blast off.
He'll be back. Exactly.
Well, and also, did you notice that whenever the phone rings and she actually answers the phone to speak to whoever is calling Buck in, she actually has had an affair with the person she's talking to on the phone in the past. She's like, "Oh, hey, it's you," and she like whispers so that Buck can't hear it.
Yeah, they have like a little conversation, a side conversation on that.
Right. So it's very much like this idea of people in power kind of passing this woman off between them. And when she calls Buck in the war room, she's like trying to convince him to like convince her that it's not just physical and that he's interested in more than sex.
And there's a book. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go on.
I was gonna say there's a book that you see in the film with like a naked woman that looks like a Playboy centerfold picture. And it is the same actress.
With the papers on her butt, like the files.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
On the plane.
Yes, Foreign Affairs. That's the same actress. So there's only one woman in the entire film, and everyone is sexually frustrated by her in large majority.
That makes sense.
Well, that was the one thing that I really got from Sterling Hayden, while we're on the sexual stuff. But I got from him that he was an incel, like correlating it with modern terms or whatever, but that he was an incel, that, he expected women to do certain things for him, but he's not going to give his essence away to him, like he's got to, like...
Well, I think he's an incel, but only because he can't perform. I think he's impotent. And so therefore, all of this is like misplaced rage.
Right. He'd be on the 4chan boards.
Yeah, which is the idea of a lot of Kubrick's idea, I think, in this movie, is a lot of the people in power, they're really aggressive, dare I say, ultra-conservative types. I think, well, I'm Kubrick's point of view here. I think he very much viewed them as impotent and taking out sexual frustrations on the world, essentially.
And that's really interesting, too, because a lot of times people I talk to, I live in a fairly conservative area, but like women can't be in power because they have their period once a month, and they get grumpy or whatever. But it's kind of the same thing with men, if they're sexually frustrated or whatever, like they're going to make bad decisions. If you're going to both those arguments are probably bad, but you can't just make it about women and not about men too, is what my argument.
Right, but it seems like this whole movie is kind of steeped in this ultra masculine culture. I mean, I guess it was made in the 60s, right? So we are more than a decade removed from World War II, right? But, you know, in a lot of the research I was doing, I watched this video that was kind of comparing the current day climate to the climate of the 60s, right? Like, we're more than a decade removed from an attack on us, you know, whereas it was Pearl Harbor then, you could compare it to 9/11 now. A lot of wars after that attack, right? And then the rise of ultra-conservative politics in power around the same time after a major attack on our soil. And just like in the 60s, this hyper-masculinity kind of rises up to where it kind of overcompensates maybe a little bit, kind of like it could be doing now. If you kind of take a step back and look at our current political situation, and you'll see kind of what's been happening over the past few years, it's very similar to what happened around the time Dr. Strangelove was being thought up. Did you notice that Captain Bat Guano was obsessed just with preverts? I think he represents sort of like the average American at this time, right? Like he represents the average guy who's so caught up in what he deems as quote preverted that he doesn't seem to understand the danger that he and everyone he knows in his entire way of life is in. He's worried about the Coca-Cola company getting ripped off. You know, he's worried about everything that capitalism tells him he should be worried about, but nothing important. I kind of get the vibe that's what Kubrick is saying here. What'd you guys make of Captain Bat Guano?
Well, I mean, it's all part of a larger thematic discussion about left versus right, and this comes across in the sexual politics we were talking about earlier, but, you know, the commies are being lumped in with the sexual preverts, and you don't know who to trust because everyone around any corner could be a commie in disguise, is what they tell the men on the base as they're coming in, and so there's just this toxic masculinity when it comes to people that aren't like you, and having this difference of opinion and having that difference kind of forced upon you through fluortization or the communist way of life, and the balance that's struck between the opposing characters and the opposing sides that kind of highlights those differences is really engaging and does spark some of the more funny moments in the film.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that I guess it's probably talked about every time I see this movie. It's like one of the famous scenes, but it's one of the things that, like, I don't know, when I was 19, I didn't quite appreciate it the same way I do here, which is that Dr. Strangelove's uncontrollable Nazi saluting hand that just can't be tamed. I like the idea that this man is just like, has this side of him that is completely uncontrollable, and everyone observes it, but everyone's too polite to say anything because they all need him and they all rely on him. And really, he's on our side now, you know. And it's just such like a skewering of the time.
Well, it's interesting that, you know, the only person that would notice or care about Strangelove's presence and being a bad thing was General Turgidson, and he's too focused on the Russian ambassador seeing the big board and being in the war room to really care about what's going on afterwards. It kind of sends him up into a fury that doesn't allow him to see clearly through his own sexual frustrations, I guess.
Yeah, also, Dr. Strangelove's plan is that every man gets 10 women, and none of them seem too upset about that.
Yeah, even the Russians and everyone in the war room unanimously agrees with that.
And also, like, I think with his possessed hand, he's basically also describing what Hitler wanted to do in World War II anyways. He wanted to get rid of, all the other people. We're going to create our own race. And essentially by going down into the bunkers, 10 men for every one man, they're all going to create their own race.
10 men for every man?
Or 10 women.
Oh, no.
Well, I mean, whatever floats your boat. Or 10 women for every man. But he's basically describing like Hitler's plan. Is, you know, like I found that interesting too.
Did you notice that a lot of the names in this movie are all like sexual innuendo?
I did not notice it, but I did notice that they were funny.
Well, like
that makes sense now.
President Kissoff. Then you have was it Merkin? The American president's name is Merkin
Muffley.
Merkin Muffley. Which, if you don't know what a Merkin is, you can Google that. But it's has to do with nudity and female nudity in movies. And then Muffley, come on. But then there's also several others throughout if you go through the actual cast, there's a lot of them. So it's just all the names are just so over the top ridiculous. Even Bat Guano, which isn't sexual, it's just completely ridiculous.
Well, it's completely consistent with the times where every character's name is a double entendre. Just look at any James Bond film ever, and all of those are littered with character names that are nothing but double entendres. There's literally a character in Thunderball called Pussy Galore, and
Pussy
how
Galore.
you're able to get away with something like that in the 1960s is shocking.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this movie could be seen as a reaction to movies like James Bond, right? Like this critique on this hyper masculinity that's permeating the pop culture at this time. Bond very much contributed to that.
Sure.
The idea of this super masculine Sean Connery sleeping with anyone and everyone he could, and then kind of making one-off sexist jokes to her. That mixed with
Well, I mean, it's really about the thermonuclear dynamics and the thermonuclear politics of the 60s. This is coming out right during the heart of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Russian missiles were discovered, within 200 miles of the American Eastern Seaboard. So Kubrick at this time, just coming off of Lolita, is obsessed with the potential ending of all civilization, is reading 40, 50, 60 books while developing this screenplay for the film. And so I think one of the great things about this is that he finds a way to warn against the dangers of this of controversial or especially dangerous thermonuclear politics by approaching it comedically to allow that to impact the widest audience. It's similarly, this is the first of the real poignant point-making satire films, using satire to make a political point about the day and age that we're seeing now. We've had films nominated in the last 2-3 years for Best Picture that take the Doctor Strangelove kind of model for political thought using black comedy or satire to make their point. Jojo Rabbit is an anti-hate satire. That's exactly the sort of it's a different political point, but that's exactly the same sort of thing that's going on here with Doctor Strangelove. Black Klansman is the same way,
I would say, but in the same
for
vein.
For sure. But there's so many comparisons that you can make between the actual Doctor Strangelove character and Taika Waititi's portrayal of Adolf Hitler in Jojo Rabbit. The similarities are right there. They're doing very similar things for similar effect.
Yeah. Okay, so I am almost done with all my thoughts about Doctor Strangelove, so I'm just going to let whoever wants to take over now.
Well, I'll just make one point real quick, and that is, we talked earlier about how kind of simplistic this kind of looks visually from a cinematography aspect, especially with the airplane footage. And
oh yeah, that was Chris.
Yeah, and so yes, they did use stock footage, especially at the beginning where you have the sexual transition of fuel between the two planes and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that I found so striking was the production design of this movie, especially when it comes to the war room itself. It's an incredibly just vivid, striking triangular building created from scratch by production designer Ken Adam. And the crazy thing about that, when I watched it the first time, it looked like the war room looked like the lair for a Bond villain. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of has that kind of aspect to it. And Ken Adam,
Goldfinger's place.
Ken Adam worked on Dr. No and was a production designer for several of the Bond films, so it really makes sense that has that visual look, and I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was incredible and probably the most visually dynamic element to the whole film.
Oh yeah, that's the set that you think of right off the bat when you think of this movie. At least I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's like the set, you know.
It's not the moment that you think of, but it is the set.
You know, I think the moment I think of, if I think of this movie like as like one image that pops into my brain, it's Dr. Strangelove's hand. You know, like giving the Hail Hitler without having to like beat it into submission.
It's got to be Slim Pickens going down with the bomb.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's
obviously the
exactly
classic one.
where I am. And, you know, just to bring back a one point, so for anybody that was confused why I could said earlier that I was the Slim Pickens of the podcast, so he was not originally in this film. The Major Kong character was supposed to be the fourth character, played by Peter Sellers in this film. Columbia agreed to finance the entire film if Peter Sellers would have played at least 4 different characters in the film. But then he got injured while starting to film the Major Kong portion of the film, and so Kubrick offered the part to John Wayne, and he immediately turned it down. So they went to Slim Pickens and got that part.
Man, could you imagine this movie with John Wayne playing Slim Pickens?
John Wayne would never be like fourth billing to.
Oh, that's true. But to all the other 3 Peter Sellers, but like John Wayne in this movie would have been something.
Yeah, imagine if John Wayne would have come out with a movie like this in his career.
Yeah. Anything where I guess he's not the tough guy as much as, you know, like all his other movies.
Yeah, where he's not John Wayne.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the point of why he turns it down to begin with.
Sure.
For sure.
Back then, you know, you were hired to be you, not hired to act as much. Leading men were just leading men, you know?
Yeah.
It was a different time.
But at least we get the first appearance of James Earl Jones in a film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, actually, I had to tell my girlfriend that was James Earl Jones because she like just didn't recognize him at all because he's so young.
She didn't recognize the voice of Mufasa in the airplane?
You know, he doesn't really sound his most James Earl Jonesy in this movie.
Interesting.
He sounds like, I mean, he sounds like him if you know who he is, which I did,
yeah.
So I could hear it. But like, he doesn't sound like Mufasa or Darth Vader. You know what I mean? He sounds
right.
He sounds like just like a normal dude. He's not given like that bass and gravitas to his voice that like Mufasa has. Anyway, we're talking much more about James Earl Jones' voice than I wanted to. Yeah, I am out of notes, guys.
I am as well out of notes on Dr. Strangelove.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. So I take it we don't have anything else.
Not on this film.
Ooh.
Oh, nope. I'm all wrapped up.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation about Dr. Strangelove. If you have anything to add to it, please write in and let us know. Let us know if we were wrong, if we were right, if you disagree or agree. Or if you want to, reach out to Matt in regards to this. He is currently getting off social media, but is there anywhere that they could send you a message?
Yes, so my website is cinematicconsiderations.com, or you can email me at cinematicconsiderations@yahoo.com.
Awesome. Cool. Again, thanks for listening, guys. And with that, I think it's time to move into our next section, which is where we pick our next Casually Criterion movie.
Woohoo!
Yay!
All right, Matt, since you are the guest, I believe you chose this week's theme. Is that correct?
I did. And going off of our earlier discussion of Portrait of a Lady on Fire and the fact that it is coming to the Criterion Collection coming up, I'm hoping sometime later this year because I need to pick up a copy of that film as soon as possible. But I thought there's not as many films in the Criterion Collection directed by women. So I thought it would be an interesting exercise, or just to try to force you all to watch a Criterion film directed by women. So that is our theme. It's films in the Criterion Collection directed by female directors.
Ooh.
You know, I'd have to look back, but this might be our first female director on our Criterion episodes.
On our Criterion, yes. I was about to say, not our first female director total. That's not even close to right. But yeah, embarrassingly, I think that might be accurate. I don't even know what the ratio for movies that Criterion Collection has that are directed by women, but...
When I did research trying to figure out what topic I wanted to throw in, you guys, I didn't count specifically, but it felt like 90 to 10. You know what I mean?
That is very little.
It was hard, but I wanted to make it. I said whatever theme I need to come up with a list of at least 10 films, and I came up with a list of at least 10 different films that I thought would make for a good episode, based off of the theme of female directors.
Okay, so I guess with that, why don't you get us started with your pick?
Oh, you're gonna make me go first. Okay,
I am.
All right. I hope I don't take Chris's pick.
I hope you do.
Okay. There's a lot of good ones, and we could talk about some of the ones that I didn't pick at the end, because I would love to recommend some more films by female filmmakers to people. But I'm going to go with the terrific film from Sofia Coppola. It's a film that I reviewed in college, doing a class on the book adaptations into film. And so that's Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides with Kirsten Dunst.
Nice, yeah.
I haven't seen this movie in a very, very long time. Since well before I knew who Sofia Coppola was.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
It's been a while, but yeah, it'd be cool to see that one again.
All right, Chris, what you got?
I picked one. We actually, when we first started the podcast, talked about a film from her, and it's Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher. From 1999. I haven't seen it, and since we watched that other movie,
You Were Never Really Here.
Yeah, You Were Never Really Here.
You and movie titles.
Yeah. I wanted to catch up on some of her films, so this is the great opportunity. This is like, as soon as you said female directors, this popped up, and also the one that Mike's going to choose popped into my head, if he still chooses that one. So, Mike.
Oh, I might. But real quick, though, before I choose mine, I'm going to keep everyone in suspense. Matt, have you seen You Were Never Really Here?
Yes, that was one of my 10 favorite films. I believe that was 2018. Was then when that film came out? I think that film fell in for me at like 9 or 10, and is a performance that I think is personally better from Joaquin Phoenix than his performance in Joker, because it's more layered and not just as bombastic.
I can name you 5 Joaquin Phoenix performances that are better than the one in Joker.
No, sure, but it's the most recent performance before Joker too. So
yeah, but Joker's performance is fine. I'm not trying to rag on that movie. I'm just saying Joaquin Phoenix is he's a treasure trove of great performances.
Indeed.
Okay, so far we had The Virgin Suicides and then Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher. So the film that I'm going to come up with is, I think, the oldest film, and that is a film by Agnes Varda called Cleo from 5 to 7, which is actually the inspiration for my Twitter handle for all these years. And then Chris reminded me that, hey, you should probably name this movie. So I did.
You have to pick this one.
Yeah, it would be silly of me not to. So I am, and that's what I'm choosing.
Awesome. If I had to guess, that's the one that's going to win. Although I think Virgin Suicides.
Yeah, I think Virgin Suicides is going to win, just for recognizability. Because I don't know if anyone except for movie nerds knows what the hell Cleo from 5 to 7 is.
Sure,
well, that's the people that are on film Twitter. So we'll see what happens. And I don't know. I think Agnes Varda is having like a kind of a moment since she's passed recently, and her new movie's coming out, or has come out.
Yeah, Agnes by Varda, or Varda by Agnes, I can't remember.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, cool. So you can vote on all of these choices. By the time you're listening to this, the poll will be up on our Twitter account, but we will also have it linked to Facebook. And by we, I mean Chris, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm never on social media.
That's right.
And you shouldn't be either, except to vote on ours.
Yeah.
Real quick, can I throw in those couple of extra films that I was going to talk about? So I'm going to quickly mention 3, and then I want to talk very briefly about, in more depth, about 1. So some of the other films in the Criterion Collection by female directors that you need to check out. Kelly Reichardt's Certain Women is terrific. It's kind of a newer film with Kristen Stewart and Laura Dern. Let the Sunshine In by Claire Denis, starring Juliette Binoche, is fantastic, as is Lena Dunham's Tiny Furniture, which came out right around the same time as Girls season 1 debuted.
It came out, I think, a couple years before Girls.
Did
I
it?
believe.
Yeah. But the film that I really want to talk about in this, and it's a film that I knew had no chance of winning the poll, so I went with Sofia Coppola. But it's Kirsten Johnson's Camera Person. It's a documentary by a longtime cinematographer who shot almost exclusively documentaries, and so she takes like the best clips from all of her different works and some extra personal documentary footage that she did of her own family, and combines it into this really compelling loose narrative structure where you get to see this beautiful camera work that tells the story of her life, but also the story of documentarians and how they work. And it's a really interesting and engaging look at cinematography and documentary filmmaking that more people need to check out.
Yeah, actually, I'm really glad you brought that up because I've really been looking forward to... She just had a movie at Sundance called Dick Johnson Is Dead, where she actually makes a documentary about her father dying. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to Dick Johnson Is Dead this year, so that should be...
And her father does play a role within Camera Person as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to check that one out for sure on my own time.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and... thank you to Jake Wagner Russell for the intro and outro music. If you want to check out more of his stuff, you can do so at soundcloud.com//bopscotch.
All right, stay tuned to this channel. We put out content every week. Next week, I think we're putting out an episode on... What's the name of that movie that I didn't want to see?
Onward.
Onward. Isn't it the one with Chris Pratt and Tom Holland?
That is the...
Yeah.
You don't want to see Anya Taylor-Joy and Emma?
I would love to see Anya Taylor-Joy and Emma if it were around me.
Ah.
I would see any Anya Taylor-Joy movie over any Chris Pratt movie any day.
Hey, Mike, I just want to throw one last thing. I bet Emma will probably be a Film Independent Spirit Award nominee.
Oh, I gotta go. I gotta sign up for this right now.
All right, well, while Mike is leaving, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe us, and review us on iTunes, because that'd be great.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We will talk to you next time. And thanks again, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all.